I'm Atrel Nashar in Washington. The U.S. military seizing two Venezuela-linked oil tankers, one in the Caribbean and the other in the northern Atlantic. President Trump also announcing Venezuela agreed to give the U.S. between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil. There are a lot of moving pieces and questions about what all of this means for energy prices in the U.S. Narco-terrorism and gun charges were behind the U.S. military capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro and strikes on the country. Now, President Trump is setting his sights on Venezuela's oil.
The United States government has already begun marketing Venezuelan crude oil in the global marketplace for the benefit of the United States.
Wednesday morning, the administration confirms U.S. forces seized two oil tankers either last docked in Venezuela or on its way to Venezuela. This one, seized in the northern Atlantic, has Russia's flag painted on the side. It follows President Trump's announcement Venezuela will give the U.S. between 30 and 50 million barrels of high-quality sanctioned oil.
We're going to sell it in the marketplace at market rates, not at the discounts Venezuela was getting. Not only will that generate revenue that will be used to the benefit of the Venezuelan people, and we're ensured that that's what the case is, but it also gives us an amount of leverage and influence and control over how this process moves forward.
Many energy experts have their doubts it will be that simple.
We are not expecting Venezuela to have an impact of any definitive value for really all of 2026.
Venezuelan crude oil is often described as heavy and sour, and few refineries have the special equipment needed to process it.
You're talking about places like southeastern Texas, Louisiana. There are some refineries that can handle that, but I want to point out those refineries, for the most part, are already operating at 95% capacity.
President Trump now expecting American oil companies to go into Venezuela and rebuild a deteriorated oil infrastructure.
There still has to be an assessment taken from U.S. oil companies, a whole host of things that has to happen before even repairs can begin. Then it's certainly an understandable situation where you may want to hedge just a little bit and find out how is the dust going to even settle.
Right now, Chevron is the only American oil company with operations in Venezuela. ConocoPhillips said it would be premature to speculate on future activities or investments. A group of oil executives will visit the White House Friday. In Washington, I'm Atrel Nashar.
The U.S. intensifying oil sanction enforcement after seizing two tankers, including a Russian-flagged vessel tied to Venezuela's shadow fleet. The seizures signal a shift from just tracking and warning to direct military action as the U.S. and NATO allies confront a growing network of dark fleet vessels moving sanctioned oil. Joining us this morning to break it all down is retired veteran Brigadier General John Teichert. Good morning to you, sir. Great to see you this morning.
Dan, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Talk about why this action militarily was necessary now and the risks if a dark fleet is allowed to operate unchecked.
Jan, there are about 1,000 vessels in this dark fleet or shadow tanker fleet that allow rogue regimes like Iran, North Korea, and even Russia and Venezuela to circumvent limits on their energy and financial flows. And so the boarding of these vessels now and the counter activities against them are an attempt to stop that. And an example maybe is that Russia has been able to stay in the war in Ukraine for the last 4 years, primarily because sanctions haven't worked because of this shadow tanker fleet. And once we start clamping down on that fleet, then it stops the ability to maintain resources of some of these rogue or malign regimes.
That's a very good point you make there with Ukraine. You know, that video we were showing just now, so dramatic to watch. Those U.S. military forces board that tanker. What is the risk calculus for forces boarding the ships when we're now hearing there's armed personnel on board these tankers?
Jan, large vessels always have an armed response, primarily to protect against privacy. But those that are boarding these vessels now are primarily led by U.S. law enforcement, highly trained, supported by capable military forces, and informed by exquisite intelligence. And so the combination of those factors make it very unlikely that there'll be a strong ability to defend against these boardings. When we need to board, we're going to make it happen.
How concerned are you about escalation when these vessels, especially one with this Russian flag, are seized in international waters?
Jan, there's something counterintuitive here, and it is that when you are scared of escalation, you actually create more conditions for likely escalation in the future because your adversaries know that you're not going to stop them, and they push the limits to a greater and greater extent, and it furthers the escalatory cycle. The way you stop that cycle is you take action. Your adversaries know that you have strength of capability and will, and that deters them. And that's actually the greatest way to stop escalation, is to stand up at the first part of escalation before it continues.
And you mentioned all the dark fleet, vessels that currently are in our waters. Are we seeing the beginning of a new phase then, where sanctions enforcement now becomes like the standard maritime security mission?
Jan, it's probably something that's been long overdue, but it's a little bit of a nuanced shift away from what we currently do at choke points in the maritime environment for counter piracy. There are places like the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden where there were concerns about Somali pirates primarily, and once we started to protect fleets through those areas, then we deterred those piracy activities. And this is a similar type of activity where now, especially at choke points around the globe, if we start standing up to the sanctioned tanker fleet, then we'll start to see that they will stop those activities because they know that we've got strength of capability and will to stop the type of activity that has been harmful to us thus far.
Right, and I want to talk about big picture for just a moment, very quickly here before we go. China is the biggest buyer of Venezuelan and Iranian oil. Given the instability in Iran right now, given the Maduro regime increasingly is becoming isolated, does that put China on the losing end now of a major energy and geopolitical battle?
Jan, the answer is yes, but let me go even bigger picture than that. The way the United States wins in geopolitical competition is twofold. Number one, that we have energy independence, drill baby drill, but maybe even more than that, we have indigenous capability to produce what we need, so we don't risk being cut off in our supply chain. But then number two, we maintain a global presence so that the supply chain is not disrupted to us and outbound from us. And maybe an example of that is during the previous 4 years, because of Houthi activity in the Red Sea, the cost of a container being shipped from East Asia to the eastern portion of the United States tripled. That is a cost that was passed on to the American consumer because we didn't control that global commons. And now if we actually show strength, then not only do we maintain the indigenous capability and maintain supply chain, but we also stop those increasing costs being passed on that would be otherwise harmful to the American consumer. Indigenous capability and strength in the global commons, those are the two ways that we win against any adversary, China, Russia, or others.
Retired veteran Brigadier General John Teichert, as always, thank you for your time with us this morning and for your service.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jan.